All right. So, welcome everyone to Inter Soul Leadership. It's our first initial podcast back from the podcast that we used to have, which was Company Culture with Yvette C. Owens. So, I'm glad. I am so excited to start off this podcast and this broadcast and this conversation, this webinar, whatever suits your fancy, with my sister and friend Elzora Watkins. We've been doing some work together over the last year, and we found it beneficial to collaborate and to be able to find ways where we can serve communities together and make life better for people. And one of those things is around this topic of social emotional learning and social emotional intelligence. What is it? What does it look like? Why should I care? Right? That's what we are looking into, and we've been studying literally. We've been studying, we've been going after resources to get deeper into this topic because we are finding it's important in various sectors of business, whether it's business, whether it's education, whether it's ministry, whether it's community. We have some guests on who are joining us right here live in the Zoom room. Debbie and Kyle are here, as well as others from other companies, and they chose to register, so they get to ask the questions. They get to chime in on this conversation as well. And so we're going to kick it off. And so, Elzora, welcome. Thank you for being a part of this. Debbie, thank you for being a part of this. And Elzora, let's start with you and have the people, guess I should introduce myself in case you don't know who I am. I'm Yvette C. Owens, CEO of DestinySpeak, Inc. I am a speaker, international best-selling author, and leadership coach, where I really teach the principles of agile change leadership and leadership as a whole, so leaders can help create cultures where everyone thrives. And I mean everyone, because I believe that leadership now must have a different sound. We must have a different look as how we approach people in those spaces. And we absolutely have to leave people feeling different than what we have in the past. And so that's my mission in life, to encourage leaders to do those things, empower them to do those things, empower emerging leaders, whether they're already adults in a leadership role, even down to our youngest leaders who are being taught and nurtured even at a very young age. So, Elzora, go ahead and introduce yourself.
First of all, I just want to say thank you for creating this space so we all can come together and serve the population who really needs to understand more information around social emotional learning. My name is Elzora Watkins. People call me the equation coach because I believe the solution is in you. And what I do is I serve district leaders, teachers, organizations around social emotional learning and how that impacts the culture and climate of the space. And my philosophy is you have to give your clients, your participants, your speakers the opportunity to giving them permission to feel, giving them permission to think, and also providing permission for them to speak as well. So that's where I play. I use hands-on approaches to help this construct stick. And I am the CEO of the Right Edge Training and Consulting Group, LLC.
And Debbie, I know you weren't probably prepared for this but you are on the screen. And so I do want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself as well.
Yes, hello. I'm Debbie Mattina. I am the Deputy Director for the insurance market for HM Architects and Engineers. And as a new leader within the company, appointed to a Deputy Director role, I do manage a team of 12 people. So I'm very excited to hear about what you all have to say about social emotional intelligence. I think it's very important. I'm also in the Women's Leadership ERG as well as diversity and inclusion. So H2M is working towards, these ERGs are very new to the company. But we are moving in a direction of, making inclusion a part of our culture, and also professionally developing our new leaders. Years ago, it was just you had a mentor or you mentored under somebody. So there was never really these open conversations about, these types of leadership, professional development things that you all are doing. So I'm very excited to be here and to hear what you have to say.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm sure people will join. And Kyle, no worries. We understand that you're multitasking, and we're just glad to have you join us too. And just any questions you have, you can put in the chat. If you're listening and you're also on the replay, please send us your questions. We're happy to answer. So let's jump in. What is social emotional intelligence, and what's that learning all about? Let's start there, because I get that question on many broadcasts that I'm invited to join. Podcasts that I'm joining, speaking engagements, people are like, okay, I hear about it, but what is it? So we are often taught about the four quadrants, which is self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, social responsibility. But then there's that fifth one that we know is really critical, and that's that critical thinking piece, right? So you can be so self-aware and self-managing, social aware, and social responsibility, but can you critically think in the moment? And I just shared this on our friend Elzora's sister, Jamila Moore, and I was on her podcast yesterday, and sharing that as a leader, you have to be able to build up that skill to go through this thought process and these mindsets, this awareness, adjust, and then react, or at least adjust and then manage it so that you can deal with it later, so that you can come back. But you don't want to be in a reactive mode out of your emotions without thinking through the process. So great leaders learn how to think through this process, go through what we're going to talk about rather in the moment. And the better you can do that in the moment, the better you're going to find yourself as a leader, being responsive to what's happening in flight, because great leaders are able to do that. Now, that doesn't mean you always have to do that. Sometimes you have to just say, I hear you, acknowledge that you're hearing what people are saying, acknowledge what's happening, and let's pause and let's take it off, or I'm going to go away and we're going to talk about it and come back later. So that's powerful too, knowing when you're not ready. Ready in that moment to really deal with what's happening without really saying I'm really not ready. But sometimes it's like, hey, I need some moments to think about that, right? So it's really like identifying, and I'm going to ask Elzora to share this, because she actually took me through this the other day. I had an experience, and she was like, well, how, because she could tell, because we've been working together for a year, right? And she could feel that something was not right. So she said, tell me, how are you feeling? And often leaders are thought that you have to forget about how you're feeling, ignore it, and just keep pushing through. Can I tell you, that's the worst thing you can do, because that's going to pile up and explode. So Zora, go ahead and share more about the process that you took me through.
Yes, yes. I was sharing with Yvette that I had kind of a rough day, and I could tell that she was having a rough day as well. And oftentimes when we have these, as leaders or as coaches or in leadership spaces, we oftentimes have rough days, and also the people in our spaces have these rough days as well. But the first thing we have to do is recognize that you're having a rough day. And that's part of a whole process. There's a series of processes that help people to get through and understand what is it that they're feeling, understanding what they're feeling, labeling it, and then being able to express what they're feeling. That way they can better regulate what they're feeling. And so I shared with her, I had done a training at the other night at a charter school. And while I was doing this training, I had this picture. And with this picture, I just showed all these different faces, these different characteristics of SpongeBob. And so Yvette, would it be okay if I share the screen?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, good.
Oh, let me give you ability to share.
Because I think you get a better understanding when you see what I'm saying. And I think it's imperative that we understand what exactly is that. So let me pull that slide up so you can see what I'm talking about. So can you see my screen?
We can.
Awesome. And so before working, this looks pretty juvenile, but it gave the participants a way of showing, expressing how they felt without being uncomfortable. It just was a fun way for them to share how they felt. And so I asked them how, I asked the participants how they felt. I did this with a class one day, and it was kind of interesting for them to be able to first recognize, but more importantly, to be able to label and articulate what they were feeling. That way, it gave me an idea of how, it gave me a way of checking the pulse of the whole environment, of the whole space, of all the participants. And what I found that was funny the other day when I did this, someone picked 15. Take a look at number 15, right? Debbie, I saw you smile, right? Right? And so someone else had picked 15 as well. And I was like, all right. I automatically assumed that their rationale for choosing 15 was the same as mine, but it wasn't. The person said they selected 15 because they felt like they always had to put on a facade. Yes, Debbie. I was surprised because I automatically assumed that their rationale for choosing 15 was congruent with my thinking around 15, when it really, in all actuality, it wasn't. But the beautiful thing is, it gave us the permission to speak about how we're really feeling, which allowed us to move forward with a better understanding of the situation that the person was feeling, and how I could, or how we could navigate and move forward in such a way that felt safe for that student or that participant or the clients. So I thought this was quite interesting to share that piece.
Yeah, and
Another,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh no, another piece I wanted to share. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see your faces. Another thing I wanted to bring into fruition. I was at another school, and I was working with this educator as he was engaging with his students. And one of the students had shared that he had learned this 3-step process from his AAA, Alcoholic Anonymous Association. And what he learned was that you can think, feel, and act. But there's so many different ways there's a combination of those different words. There are 6 different ways you can arrange those words. You have to excuse me because I have a mathematical mindset, a mathematical background. So when he said that, my tail started to wag, and I thought of all these wonderful permutations. And so he said that you, when you're trying to move to the next level, you have to think before you speak or act, right? This is what he was saying. And when I first heard that, that made sense to me. And I asked him to think of a scenario, or looking at those different ways of arranging those words. Give me an example of a scenario where you thought before you acted and spoke, or give me a scenario where you spoke before you felt and acted. So it just gave a space for us to really talk about that. But there's science behind the fact that your emotions, learning, or in any sort of activity, emotions happen before the thinking process. It's just how the brain works, because in your brain there's that middle portion that your thought enters, and it goes to that middle portion before it gets to the rational thinking portion that's in the front of your brain. And so that's why emotions have a way of regulating how people show up and how people speak. And that middle part of the brain is called the limbic system. That's where you feel before it gets to that rational piece of the forefront of your head.
Right.
You're about to say something?
Yeah, and I wanted to say that I believe that that's where we need to turn it on for our leaders.
Mhm.
Have our leaders wake up and turn that whole thought process on, because too often leaders are thinking like their leaders. They're in that moment and thinking, okay, what would Sue do? Or how would she respond to this? And therefore they respond to that. And one of the things that I think we need to get back to is thought leadership. And we're not looking for leaders as leaders, we're not looking for others to think like we do necessarily, or to mimic what we're doing. We need literal thought leaders. So I'm calling everyone who's listening to turn on your thinking. Turn on your thinking. And now when you do that, the things that Elzura was sharing around being aware of what you're feeling, as opposed to focusing on what somebody else might have felt in a similar moment. And no, let me mimic that and let me do that. No, how do you feel about that moment? Now, that doesn't negate that there is protocol within your organization, or there's a cultural way of doing things in your organization. But though you've been invited to the table, you've been invited to that organization to be a thought leader in every aspect, every role, because someone saw greatness in you. They saw skill set, experiences, or your core values that they thought would be beneficial to this organization, this team, this school district, whatever, this ministry, whatever you're bringing them into. They need your thoughts, not for you to come in, assess what the organization does, how they behave, and let me just mimic that. So being socially, emotionally intelligent requires that I'm willing to be a thought leader, and I'm aware of who I am, my identity. And I know without a shadow of a doubt, many people go through identity crisis in organizations, because you come in thinking one way, and then the work that somebody does while you're there is to try to make you assimilate to what's happening around you. And
And
I suggest that we are now in a position, because of where we are globally, that we need thought leaders in every role that are invited to the table, that are socially, emotionally aware of themselves and the environment.
mm,
That means we have to dust off this stuff, right? These things that we just assumed, oh, I saw this happen, so I'll just do that. They speak this way, so I'll just speak that way. No, and that's what inter-soul leadership is all about. What are you? Who are you? Who is that person in the mirror?
mm,
And what am I challenged with? What am I great at? And how do I help leave people feeling better than what I found them?
mhm.
That takes a lot of self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, social responsibility, and critical thinking. And you
Mm.
have to start practicing it, because as Elzura was saying, it has to happen in the moment.
Yeah. And Debbie put something in chat. She said, bring our authentic self to the table. And it's so important. And I
Exactly.
agree. A lot of this construct around social emotional learning has a lot to do with brain theory, and
Mm-hmm.
also who we be from thousands and thousands of years of that of our survival system, right? And it's so funny because I was listening to a book today called The Gabriel Method, and it talks about the losing of weight. And there was this one piece where he was sharing how whenever you're in a stressful situation, your body um, your body reacts to that, and sometimes you have to take yourself out of that situation quickly out of that situation, and it's kind of tied into that flight aspect of the parasympathetic nervous system, not the parasympathetic, but the sympathetic nervous system. When you move quickly out of a situation, your body changes chemistry, and then when you get into a safe space, your body automatically calms itself down. In other words, the cortisol levels in your brain begins to decrease. And so sometimes you have to physically take yourself out of that situation to let your body know that it's safe. And then once your body has realized that it's safe, then it can come back into that space knowing now that it's safe. And there's so much research that talks about how your emotions impact your body. It impacts your health. It impacts the fact that you gain weight, lose weight. Like, your body is so brilliant. And oftentimes we don't understand these things because we've not been taught the methods or the tools to help us to navigate these stressors, create the spaces where people can feel like they can have a conversation to, first of all, identify and express what they're feeling without being made to feel wrong about feeling a certain way. So there are so many wonderful techniques that can be done that can just kind of calm your thoughts down, calm your body down. And as it's unfortunate that we aren't aware of these techniques. Like, it's amazing that we've not been taught these techniques. Simple techniques such as breathing, and we've all heard of meditation, but like really understanding the thoughts behind the meditation, like what really does meditation do for your body? What does breathing really do for the body? What does tapping do for the body? Like, there's so many different tools and strategies that can be used to help employees and spouses navigate certain things. So I have a quick question for you, Debbie or Kyle. Like, what are some of the things that you're noticing in your organization right now that speaks to what we're talking about?
I would say different situations, like as a leader, you're constantly thrown stressful situations. Maybe change in work schedules, or, employees having issues, and just learning how to react to them, and sometimes not to react at all. And like you said, just take a moment, breathe. You don't have to, react right away with something verbal. But think about it. So I think it applies to that. I'm a mom, so I have twins at home. So you have to make sure that, you take a second.
Yes.
And then you don't want to react to certain things. I'm a wife, I'm a friend. It applies to so many different situations. Um, so I've learned as a leader that you really just have to take a step back sometimes, and really think about what's going on. Sometimes, saying nothing is doing something, and not having any type of a reaction. So I just think it really applies to all different situations. And it's very important for people to think about that and not, like you said, mimic things in a workplace, because you bring your own authentic self to work, and learn what works for you. What works for me may not work for Yvette or Elzora or Kyle, or anybody else, so, but it works. So I tend to be very different in our organization. Where we work with architects and engineers, so they're very high stressed. We also work in the insurance network as well, so very high volume type of projects that have to get turned over quickly. So learning how to deal with that and not let it internalize is very important for your own health.
Absolutely. And it's so
Yeah.
funny that you said that. I used to in school, my major was architecture, and I graduated with a landscape architecture degree. And so the engineering piece, the being making sure that you complete the projects on time for
Very
the
stressful.
developers.
Yeah.
It is, driving. This is before they used to email the stuff, driving to the courthouse, making sure it reaches the destination on time. It can be quite stressful. And when you truly understand that there's brain research behind it, it's like It's like, okay, I'm not crazy. It's natural to feel this way. But the question is, how do I self-regulate? How do I make decisions and that's going to honor my integrity, but also honor the people who I serve, right? In such a way that's with grace and ease. Like, how do you do that? Kyle, was there anything you'd like to share around this?
I think most of the stuff we're doing outside of the office is also stressful. So, when we're on site in some of these, stressful or high profile kind of situations, it also helps to, say you walk into a building and you got to do 20 floors, like that's a lot to take on, brain power wise. But if you just take that second to be like, all right, like let's come up with a plan. How are we going to tackle this and make more digestible, I guess, milestones also helps to kind of divide and conquer instead of being like, how am I going to do this? There's no way I'm going to get this done. You start worrying about getting it done instead of just, picking off a piece by piece by piece, and then it gets a little bit easier.
And I love that approach about the solution, right? Because if we invite other people to partake in the solution, then we are not carrying that burden ourselves. And too often leaders think, oh, we got a problem. They bring a problem and I got to figure it out. Nope. We bring a problem, we see an issue. Now, how can we also contribute to the solution to that? And if you can work your way through that. So I often tell leaders, don't fly solo. Don't think you have to fly solo. You don't. And you shouldn't. You should be able to know when you need to take the lead, let somebody else take the lead so you can see how things work from a different perspective. And you can see how your team is functioning from a different perspective as opposed to you being in the front. And that gives you that breathing space that Elzora talked about. It gives you that mental capacity to say, now I not only see my team, but I also see me as a reflection, as being a part of the team and not just leading the team. And so I love that, Kyle, bringing those solutions, inviting others to say, look, we got these 20 floors to conquer. How are we going to solution to be able to conquer them within the time frame, right? Because we also often have time constraints, we have scope constraints, we have risk constraints, all those things. But we need to be able to partner and collaborate with people to get those done. And that takes somebody who's really strong in who they are or aware of who they are, so that I'm not threatened by giving other people opportunities to speak in that moment or to contribute in that moment.
I have a quick question. How did you feel when Yvette said you don't have to fly solo? How did that feel in your brain to when she said that to you?
I think it's relieving.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're not doing it on your own.
Yeah. Yeah, because oftentimes we feel that we got to fix it. As leaders, we feel that we have to fix everything, but it's not incumbent upon us to fix everything. Like how can we leverage our team's strengths to co-create or to curate the possibilities? Like that makes me smile.
Yeah. And that leans on that social side of the quadrant for emotional intelligence, right? How aware are you of the dynamics in the space that you're in? How aware are you of the gifts and talents on your team beyond what you hired them for in that position? Because people are not just that skill that you hired them for is not just the skill that they carry. So what's the depth of that individual that you can draw on in that moment so that you can get further than if you just saw them as that one engineer that has this specialty or this expertise, but I don't see the depth of that person and their experiences that can also be drawn up to help us solution for this situation that we're in. So that is being aware of the social aspect of what we're doing. And we're talking today about leading with social emotional intelligence. Who am I? How do I manage me? What's going on in my in sphere of influence around me? And how am I participating in being responsible in that environment? And
And also,
critically thinking through those moments.
Yvette, when you were talking, it made me think of strengths also. Like how are people aware of their individual strengths, and then also how are they leveraging their strengths as it relates to social emotional learning or intelligence. And I was reading this book, Social Emotional Learning 2.0, and in the book, the author talks about the difference between IQ and EQ. IQ is your intelligence, but the EQ, the social emotional piece, is paramount, because in the past, before they start doing the research on emotional learning, they realized that it had to be something other than just the IQ of a person. And you've seen situations where a person who has high IQ, but yet their social skills aren't as strong as their intellectual skills, which causes them to not advance as far as they could. So there's something to that emotional intelligent piece. And when we take in consideration those emotional intelligent pieces, then that creates a space for us to really balance and utilize not only the IQ but the EQ as well. But in order to do that, you have to be aware. You have to be self-aware of what's working, what's not working. You have to not only be self-aware, but you have to be able to manage yourself. And how can we expect to manage others when we may need some support around managing ourselves? And then being aware of that social piece. How are we engaging with folks and individuals? As well as how do we manage those relationship skills, which helps us in turn make those decisions, those responsible decisions that's going to impact the whole environment, that's going to impact the business, that's going to impact the clients. So it goes beyond, it broaches beyond the walls of your institution. It goes into how do you show up for your clients, which is so very key. How are you being seen as your client to your clients? Do your clients want to continue to work with you, or how can you create a space where they want to continue to work with you? So this is why social emotional learning is so very key.
Yeah, so as we start to wrap this up, we want to leave everybody, I always want to leave people with some practical things they can put in place that they can make this happen. We've talked about what it is, we've talked about the impacts, we talked about how it shows up and how it's been beneficial. But Yvette, what do I do as a leader? I'm a leader, okay, I get it. How do I get my team to where I need them to be actually social, emotional, intelligent, right? So I would suggest, first and foremost, create a safe space where they can vocalize and participate and be able to stretch their ability to share, right? That safe place where, and you as the leader may have to initiate it. And they will, and the more transparent you are, and the more vulnerable you are in a space, then that it literally creates the space for them to do the same. Because there is a such thing as they will follow the leader. We used to play that game, follow the leader. Maybe I'm dating myself, but anyway, they will follow the leader. So how do I do that? You had an assignment. We do retrospectives often when you have assignment. How did it go? What went well? What didn't go well? And don't just let those be surface conversations, but really be open to hearing what went well, celebrate, And what didn't go well is not a time to point fingers at individuals, but is a time to work through how could we have done, and notice I said we have done a better job in that area. Because it could have been one individual, and I'm not negating the fact that a leader needs to sometimes work with an individual to help bring them up to par where you need them to be. But it's also a time when you can have your team work through and think through this together as a unit. What didn't go well? Why didn't go well? Who do we need in that space? Who did we need that we didn't have access to? What timing did we need? Did we overestimate or underestimate the timing that we needed to get that through? Can we be truer to what we need in the future in those instances, as opposed to trying to satisfy somebody's imposed timeline? Because we often have those, right? People say, oh, you have to have it done by this date. And you know, there is no way on this side of glory that you can get it done, but you say yes. So how can we communicate those times differently, that I hear what you need, I can get you this by that time, but I can't, and I'll get you that by this time. Does that work for you? So being able to put those things on the table, also being able to hear your team. I talk to groups often about leaning into the resistance. When you are even initiating a situation or a scenario or assignment, and you're all of a sudden you're getting this feedback that we did this before, or if we do this, this is what I'm afraid we could run into. This is what we might need to be aware of. Don't brush those moments off. Lean into it, understand what's being said, and figure out how you can mitigate those situations together. Again, don't fly solo. Mitigate those situations together. The other thing is, if you want to grow your social, emotional intelligence on your team, put them and give them opportunities to be in spaces where they can grow it. Right? Sometimes we want to be that shield for them and protect them in a sense, but we don't give them space to grow and spread their wings. But give them an opportunity to be able to report back to senior leadership, or to be able to report back to the team, or to take the lead on a certain assignment, with your undergirding them if necessary. But it's nothing like actually doing something that you learn in those moments who you really are. Let's face it, some of the things that we've gone through, I didn't know that I had the capability of doing those things, or the capability of responding in the way that I did, until I was in that moment. Can you drum up the ability to be with your team or individuals on your team in that moment, and have the courage and boldness to let them walk that walk while you still support them through it, and also revisit what went well and how we can do it even better the next time? So helping your team spread those wings, inviting them to the table for conversations around how we're going to tackle things, better collaboration, but also being transparent, vulnerable for yourself, working through it. And the powerful, I think Debbie said it, I know Elzora said it, you know what? I need a moment. I hear you. I understand. I believe I understand, so that they know that you understand. Say back what they've said. And I need a moment. Let me think about this, and I'll get back to you on X date. Because often people hear you say, oh, I need a moment, and you go away and you never address it anymore, because that was just your exit stage right card, right? No, if they had the ability to share with you, you owe them to be able to come back and say, I've heard you, and this is where I am, and then engage in that conversation. Elzora, is there anything else you wanted to add around things that people can take away from these conversations?
Yeah.
And this applies to our children too. You know, it's like, I'm mom, right? But yeah, I heard you, now just do what I say. Sometimes that's okay, but many times, especially in today's world, our children need to know why we're making decisions that we make, so that they can make similar decisions, or they at least know the context in which our answer is coming from.
So I do have a suggestion. Whenever you're having a meeting or a gathering, do a check-in, do a pulse check-in just to find out where everyone is, and give them the space to share and to feel as if they've been heard. I think that's one of the main things. Yeah. And learn some tools that can help you to self-regulate, and also I would say be open to tools and strategies to help not just you to self-regulate, but for your constituents to self-regulate as well. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Anyone else, Kyle or Debbie, did you want to say anything as we're chiming out? I know Debbie mentioned in the comments, and I know that they may not do it the way that you would do it, but it gets done, and that's okay. And that's for sure. Because if you really want thinking people, and who doesn't want people who are thinking around you, then it may not be done. And I may not have the best answer. Sometimes I don't, right? And so we get so much more done together than we can flying solo. So go ahead, Debbie.
Yeah, I would just agree. Just making a safe space that people have the opportunity to share ideas, share, if they're not having a good day, if they're stressed out, they're they feel safe enough to be able to speak to their leaders, about that, or even their coworkers, just even being, just a colleague. I call it just being a good human being, and just, listen to people. We're all going through something. There's so much stuff going on in this world that people are dealing with aside from work, that
Right.
four-letter word. So, I think it's so important to make sure that when you're growing your team, that, they're a part of it, they feel connected to it, and for you to just have the realization that everybody's going to do it their own way, and it's going to get done, and have faith in them, and for them to feel that validated, that you do have faith in them, is so important and empowering.
And you brought up another thought for me, is that sometimes I think leaders don't want to go down that road of hearing somebody's issues or how they're feeling, because they think they're going to get lost in that stuff, right? Because we often say, I don't want to take on anybody's stuff. I have my own stuff. I can't take on anybody's stuff, right? But you can still be a great listener, because Elzora said it, a lot of people just want to be heard. And if you just open up the space to let them hear, know that you heard them, and they'll solve their own issues, or if you can give them a referral or whatever. But for the most part, they just want to listen, and you don't have to get stuck. You won't get stuck in their situation and their scenario. You don't have to allow yourself to get pulled into it as a part of what's going on. If you just give them that ear and that space, and respond from your role in their life as the leader in that space, or whatever your role is, respond from that perspective. That's all people are looking for. They're not looking for you to come in, step in, take care of their family, take care, go talk to the husband or whatever. They're not looking for that. They just need you to, or even at work, if it's a issue with a coworker, teach people how to work through it together. Give them the tools that they can work through it themselves, as opposed to you stepping in and thinking, oh, I got to go fix this between these two coworkers. No, you allow them the space to walk and think through it, so that now, because you're now helping to be self-aware, self-managed, giving them tools to self-manage, socially aware and social responsible, and critically think through those moments. And then you're going to see your team thinking more, becoming stronger, and you really, really achieving greatness. Elzora, did you want to jump in before we close?
I'm just smiling because you just made me think about when I was coaching volleyball, 20 something years ago, to a bunch of high school students. And I remember, You know, at the beginning, I was constantly telling them what to do, constantly telling them what to do. And at some point, I realized that I needed to give them space to think. And it was when I gave them the space to think, that's when we began to win. So just giving them the space to think, mm, giving them the space, giving them the permission to feel, think, and speak.
That's
I
good.
think that's key.
That's a great way to wrap this up. I want to thank you all for joining the first episode of Intersoul Leadership. It's so great to have Debbie and Kyle with us as well. Thank you, Elzora. You know, you got me here. um, so we Elzora is from say again.
The Right Edge Training and Consulting Group.
The Right Edge Training and Consulting Group. I'm from DestinySpeak. If you want to learn more about what we do and how we do it, reach out to each of us. We're happy to serve because we know there's great potential in every organization, and it's time for it to show up. Leaders to carry less of the burden because they're giving space for that potential to show up. Thank you all for joining, and we'll see you on the next episode. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye. And stop recording.